This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Stephen and Sharlene Licciardello. And welcome to the Fan of Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we want to talk to you today about the struggles you've had. We're gonna get into that a little bit deeper into the show, but want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly network. You can see that icon up there says Newsly. And for our audience, if they use the coupon code GHOST, they get 1 month free premium subscription. So we want to let people know about that. They can check it out. That's an audio only platform for those of you who are on the go. And so that's one thing. We've had a relationship with Newsly for a while. And also want to let people know this is actually episode 985 of the Fan Electric Ghost podcast, tracking out on Apple Podcast. And we also have your website up, which for those of you who are listening is www.rewriteyourlifestory.com.au. And that will be fully clickable when we're published. You'll be able to click through that and go right to that URL. So for those of you in the audience, like if someone hits that URL, what do they find there?
So what they can find there is also you can subscribe to our newsletter, and there's a free download on 6 pillars of rewriting your own life stories. We also have our own podcast with featured stories about people who have written their life story, either out of a tragedy or just out of discomfort and decided that they, wanted something different and wanted to rewrite their own life story.
That's right.
That's awesome. So we're going to get to the topic again, from struggle to strength, how our journey of healing became our mission. And you're acclaimed transformative coaches, you're best-selling authors, and you're behind the Rewrite Your Life Story. And you like you said, you can click that link and get in touch with you. So I guess I'm going to start with the first question. You can talk about your personal journey, how to live to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having us on the show. Our story is Sharlene and I actually met when we were 14-year-olds. So we were really good friends. I was 14 and, things led to another. And at the age of 21, we got married. And then around 22, 23, we decided, let's start a family. So we were young, we were naive, but know where this journey would take us. So we've been married 23 years now.
Yeah.
And, I say we were young and naive because what you know at the age in your 40s is very different to what you know in your 20s. And resilience builds over time and things build over time. So at the age of 23, we started, trying to have a family and realized things weren't working out for us. And then decided to do a lot of testing and things like that. And it worked out that I wasn't able to have children. So I remember that day was probably, it was probably one of the hardest days finding that, because I think as a male, sometimes masculinity is defined by having offsprings. And it's really looking at and redefining what masculinity is. So when that option has been taken away from you, you start to question a lot of who you are and what your purpose is in life. At the time, Sharlene and I were quite strict in our belief systems, our religious views, and didn't believe that IVF was an option for us. So, we were, relying on a higher source, relying on God. And, 4 or 5 years later, nothing was happening despite all our prayers. And, when that happens, disappointment sets in. But I just want to backtrack. I remember the day I found out, I said to Sharlene, I know you want to be a mother because we've always spoken about being a family, and I can't give you the one thing you want. And I said, I actually give you permission to leave me. If this is, because I know you want it and you're still young, you're only in your early 20s. And Sharlene said to me, and I'll never forget this, and this is how supportive she is. She said to me, I married you for who you are, not for what you can give me. Whether you give me children or not is not why I married you. I married you for you. And I remember hearing those words, but still the guilt and the shame. And it's really interesting that guilt and shame comes in from something that you're out of control of. And that guilt and shame really plagued me for a lot of years, really up until recently when we were able to become vulnerable in our story. So this story is like a 20-year journey because we've been married 23 years, but it's only recently that we've become comfortable in the story to share the story. Fast forward about 5 years, we decided that we would look into IVF and look for a donor. And Sharlene and I were really, cautious, as in, how do we choose a donor? We went to many IVF facilities. And when we actually took the step of, let's look for a donor and let's do this, Sharlene made sure that I was part of the whole process. She never, and I will say one thing about Sharlene, and one thing for if any couple is struggling through IVF, struggling through infertility, we personally don't like the word infertility because it has such negative stigmas. So we prefer to use the term childless by nature or childless by choice. Because there are people that are childless by nature, like we were, and there are people that are childless by choice. Now, if you remove the cause, the result is still childless. So infertility can be, that word in itself can be quite harmful to people and quite hurtful. And the shame and the guilt that comes from that. So during that period, Sharlene, we went through counseling, we went to meet all the requirements, and we chose our donors. We went through 18 cycles of IVF, and in that period of time, Sharlene did fall pregnant twice, but had miscarriages very early on in the piece. It wasn't until we hit, our maybe late 30s, early 40s, that we decided that we were going to transition from childless to nature to childless to choice. And the reason we did that is, one, we didn't want to, we had this theory that we didn't want to be parents in our 40s. Our energy levels wouldn't be there. This was our choice, and there's
patience levels.
Patience levels. This was totally our in our 40s. We all respect to people that do become parents in their 40s. But by the time we hit our late 30s, early 40s, Sharlene's body started playing up with her, 18 cycles of IVF, hormones and all that. It was just too much. The last straw was when the last cycle, when Sharlene was taken to hospital, and I think they removed eight eggs at that time. And we had gone through all the hormones, all the processes again, and none of the 8 were viable embryos.
Yeah, that was it for me.
That's too much. Yeah,
that was just the breaking point to Sharlene. And so, we decided to do that. But I guess that's very short. And we decided, we're going to be childless by choice now, because one, your body can only handle so much. And I totally respected Sharlene's choices in that, because she respected my inability to give her children. So that happened. And then we didn't realize the grief and the loss and the pain we would go through, because for the last 15 years, we had given so much energy and so much mental capacity to this. And we had isolated ourselves because, all our friends were having children, and we felt we had nothing in common. And these were all lies we were telling ourselves. So it came to a point where we felt that we had no friends left, simply because we were isolating ourselves. We were part of a church community. We weren't going to church anymore because we're like, well, everyone our age has children, and
how can we relate?
How can we relate? Yeah, we felt we were unrelatable to people. And it's really interesting looking back. Yes, it was a protection mechanism as such, but it actually did more damage than good, because healing can only happen in community. And even today on our social media post, which is so timely, today we did, I wrote a post on how your pain is your testimony. And sometimes we don't realize the journey when we're going through the journey, but that journey serves. And I got this from a conference we attended recently in Orlando, Florida, called Faith Over Fear. And in that conference, the speaker, Ray Higdon, and John Maxwell was there, was really talking about how your pain is your story. And though we don't understand it at the time, we understand that. And it's okay to feel the emotion, the pain at the time, but knowing that you're one step ahead of someone else who may be going through that similar experience. So that really served us as a fuel for our mission as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak about your experience during that time too?
Yeah, I mean, because it was very similar, but I guess different from my perspective. I remember when Stephen came to me and told me about that, and I was like, I couldn't understand why he would think that, I would want to leave him just because of that issue. And for me, I knew that even though I wanted children, I knew that we both had a purpose beyond just children. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I'm not going to leave you just because of that. So it's heartbreaking for me when I realized how guilty and how much shame he felt during that time. And at the same time, I know that all I could do is just do my best just to be supportive and do what I can just to be there for him during this stage. And while we were going through the whole IVF treatments, I know that, Stephen was so supportive during the whole process. And even though he would tell me that, it was feeling guilty through the whole thing. There's not a lot of people who would do that. A lot of people would use that guilt and use it as an excuse not to be there or, to escape that sort of issue. But, he was there with me 100%. And, I'm very thankful for that support. So I think, the whole thing about this is just being supportive. For those out there who are going through the same struggle, just support each other, be there for each other, put your own fears aside and just be there because you're both in it together. You're both facing the same thing. So if you can come together and just support each other, put your own fears aside for a while just to be there for each other, and you'll find that you'll be able to get through this a lot sooner than later.
I think your story is very inspirational because I've met, in my life, a lot of people that, you have expectations because society sets expectations for marriage and for couples and the whole structure of a family, right? So if you've been taught from a young child that that's what being a husband is, or being a mother is, or being a wife and a husband, that whole structure. And the society, now has different models, but there's this idealized model. And then you can see why people would feel guilty. Some people would feel well, now they play the blame game and then they're like, oh, I can't be what I imagined it would be. And then that could cause, instead of just having the expectation, dealing in the now of the reality and actually, they go, are you together because you love each other? Or are you together because you expected this person to be your savior, or it was supposed to complete you? Or are you going to accept them no matter what, who they are? Yeah. If somebody gets cancer, you accept them. I had cancer. My wife accepted me. She had cancer. I accepted her. We both ended up having cancer at different points. And some people that's too hard for them. And when I was going through cancer therapy, I knew people that broke up because they couldn't handle it. And it's really the kind of, where are you going to be? You never know where you are until you actually hit it. Some people don't have the ability to do that. So I think you're very insightful, and it's interesting that you've become coaches to kind of help people, where you do, that is your model now. That's you want to take what you've learned, right, and be able to help people.
Yeah, correct. And it's really interesting, when we look at the statistics around infertility, 1 in 6 couples will go through infertility. So it's actually quite bigger than what we think. And when Sharlene and I decided that, enough was enough and we were going to become childless by choice now, there was nothing out there to help your next steps.
Mm.
There's a lot of books and there's a lot of resources while people are going through infertility treatment, but there's actually nothing that says, how do you redefine your purpose? How do you redefine your life? How do you rediscover who you are? Because you've spent so much time and energy, as you said, in what society thinks is normal, you know, and I really want to share the pain of childless by nature never fully goes away. There's always this dull ache, you know, but what it is to rediscover something greater than yourself, rediscover the ability to make a contribution to others. It's not about finding pseudo parent ways. Now, what I mean by that is, I don't mean if you choose the path of fostering or adoption and that's your purpose, go ahead, like that is awesome. When Charlie and I reflected, we felt we couldn't do that. And the reason why is I don't feel I could, for me personally, fostering I thought would be too hard once the child leaves. You know, and I would go through too much emotions and all that. So for me, it was a decision, you know, whether it was a selfish decision or not, it was a decision of self-preservation. And I think that's okay, you know, and I really admire couples that are able to do that. Adoption, we looked at adoption, and Australia's adoption laws are so hard. Overseas adoption in Australia is so difficult, and I know there's been a lot of forums and reviews around how to change adoption in Australia, but for us going through that journey again would only impact the pain.
More traumatic. Yeah, more traumatic to go through that structure again.
Yeah. So we decided that was not for us, but we also decided that we didn't want to have pseudo type where people call us mum or dad or things like that, because that's not the real structure of a family. And yet we needed to embrace us as a core unit, and our nephews, our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, that was our family now. And that it was actually okay not to have children.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, like, if once you realized you didn't have to be isolated, then you could be like that uncle or aunt, you know, to within family structures where at least I know in the Black community, there's a lot of aunts and uncles that take on a lot of roles that are very much like the father and mother. Within the Black community, at least in the United States, there's a lot of people who take on significant family roles, and it can able to feel, like this aunt is very close to you, or this uncle is very close to you. So there's other ways to imagine things. I mean, everybody has their own way of doing it, but I'm imagining there's the different ways to take that on.
The way we approach it is, we can advise. We see ourselves as bus drivers. Okay, we'll tell you what we believe is okay, but you can get off at any step or any stop, because we can't get emotionally attached to those decisions that other people make, because those decisions are your decisions and you're totally 100% responsible for your decisions. So we can drive the bus and you're welcome to get off at any stop along the way. But we will definitely advise you what we believe is okay. But at the end, it's your choice, and that's okay, because we learn from our choices.
Yeah.
So once you got transitioned to like being able to have the childless path, and you're like you said, like anything that you go through, I don't think you ever forget. Like as a cancer survivor, I never really forget the trauma of going through that and surviving a level 3 sarcoma. I was able to survive. It's always like there. It never really goes away. And so like I think when you go through trauma, whether it's like medical trauma or mental trauma or emotional trauma, like you never really get totally past it. You live with it. You learn how to cope. You learn how to move forward. But it's like you have to, it's like kind of in the room, and you have to know how to handle it.
That's right.
Yeah, totally right. And I think step one is acknowledge the pain.
Yeah,
Would you
absolutely.
agree?
Acknowledging that it exists and it's still there.
Yeah. And it's also becoming comfortable in the despair, comfortable in the pain. You know, isolation can be damaging, but it also can bring healing, because it's only in the quiet place that we can feel our true soul's purpose. And, you know, we used many different modalities and tools to bring healing our way. But can I tell you, sometimes quietness is the best way, because it helped us redefine who we were as a couple. It helped us redefine who we were as a unit, but also it helped us redefine our purpose in life.
Yeah.
Now, our purpose is not about IVF, because that is just one thing. But when you overcome something like trauma, whether it be cancer, whether it be IVF, whether it be death, you know, whatever you overcome, the skills of overcoming are transferable. So rewriting your life story is not just about IVF. It's about when we get uncomfortable in our current situations and need to do a reboot or a rewrite. And that's what, and whatever the circumstances are, those skills are transferable.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people, I find that, and quite often rightly so, they'll just get so caught up in like the situation, the unfavorable situation that they're in, and it just becomes part of their identity of who they are. They start rehashing it and telling it all the time, and it becomes about who they are then. So they don't know what else to do, like when something else challenges them. So I guess for us, like our challenge is, if you're not comfortable with something, be willing to and courageous enough to look into changing it. Find people to support you. Find people that will nudge you and keep you accountable in your change and help you and support you along the way.
Yeah. And what's really important is change isn't always about massive action. You know, we decided to stop IVF in 2018. So we're talking, you know, quite a few years ago now. And it's only in the last year that we've began to share the journey. But we took daily steps to our recovery. We took daily steps to our healing. And we didn't rush into the rewrite, because we wanted the rewrite to be right for us. And it was just a matter of, you know, journaling is one of the biggest tools that, you know, Sharlene is a counselor, and one of her biggest tools is journaling, you know, and journaling brings so much clarity as well. And it's just redefining, okay, what does it look like now? Or what can it look like?
I think it's really important when you talked about quiet, because if we live in a world where there's so much noise, you know, I'm a child of the 70s, and we didn't have the cell phones, we didn't have the social media, I didn't have it. I'm 56. And so I kind of come from a time where, you know, I wasn't guided as a child. I kind of had imagination. I would just make things up. I didn't get guided by a video game. I didn't get guided by social media. I kind of went outside in the woods and jumped ramps with my bicycle or built a rector section, whatever. But the whole idea is that there was a lot of quiet. There's a lot of peace. You know, there's only 3 channels on TV. There's only 3 or 4 channels. It's like, not 1,000 channels. So I had, and I continue to kind of think about the quiet moments as a creator, as an artist. Sometimes you have to have that space where you disconnect or get away from things and kind of be in a little isolated kind of stage, like my bedroom studio. I kind of am in this place where I kind of can just not plug in. And then I think a lot of good ideas come from kind of journaling. You know, as artists, we journal. We keep records of all of our poetry, all of our songwriting. And it ends up being like a very cathartic process. You know, people use art therapy. You know, people who are creative kind of naturally are in that. Some people don't know how to do it. And so they have to be taught through mentors or life coaches or different therapists of how to actually take what's inside and kind of put it on the page, put it on a memo, put it on a canvas.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to talk into that? Because you're probably better than me at speaking into that. Yeah.
I know. you did mention like how, there's so much quiet back in the day, and then now there's so much going around us, and it's easy to see how like a lot of people use that noise just to escape those feelings of being uncomfortable, and they'll just try and use all these distractions around them like as tools to get away from like really dealing with that issue in the moment. And it's understandable, and at the same time it's probably not the most helpful. But if you want to move forward, sometimes it's good to find someone who'll be there with you to allow you to be in the silence without talking, or just if you have to deal with your emotions, to have someone there with you to guide you through that if you need to. But I see that it's so important just to spend that time, put all those devices away, just find that time to really get in touch with who am I as a person, who, like, how can I find a new purpose out of this situation?
I find it like I do a lot of meditation. I'm a Buddhist. So like I do chanting, breathing exercises. I lived in Japan for 2 years, was into Tai Chi, and a lot of things are more Eastern mindset where you can kind of go off, do Tai Chi, do my chanting, do my Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, my Nichiren Daishonin Buddhist. But the idea that you can find kind of peace by, like, a poet, like a Victorian poet said, nature is the cathedral. So I live in New Hampshire. I like to walk in the pines and not have a headphone on or not have my a phone on. I just walk in the woods and listen to nature, and I find that that's very restoring. That gives
Yes.
me a lot of peace. And in my day job, I'm a software developer, and I'm in a very chaotic, kind of heavy time deadline, very stressful work. And then I like to be able to just walk out in the woods, go on a canoe or something, just get out in nature. And I find that gives me that's why I live in New Hampshire, because I can just immediately go into the woods and get away from it and get
Mm.
really connected. And I think that's very restorative. It helps me.
Yeah, and what's really important is start with 5 minutes, start with 2 minutes, start with 1 minute, if that's all you can start with. And like any muscle that we build up, we build up that time in quietness and in a restorative space.
Absolutely. And one of the things, and you mentioned the meditation, which is really great because, like, there's a lot of the breathing techniques, even through that can help people just actually listen into their body and notice, because we all have our own rhythm in our bodies. And when you listen in, tune out from what's all that noise outside and just listen to that rhythm within your body, that itself can be very calming and reassuring, because that's what you're born with. You're born with that rhythm. And the more you tune into that and listen into that rhythm, it really helps to just bring your heart level down, like the beating of your heart. It just slows it down and helps the body just to relax.
So it seems like from all of your journeying, through your um, issues with your personal journey, it seems like the storytelling kind of becomes the roadmap, that like learning how to tell your story. Because I think
Yeah,
I find in life, like if you can tell your story, if you can, to give your elevator pitch to the world, if you learn how to do that in a way that connects, because you got to connect to the other person so they get it. Once you figure out how to take that internal struggle and actually communicate it out, and you get out of the fear, right? Because a lot of times you'll have fear that you won't tell
Mm.
that story, you won't go out and relay it because you're embarrassed or you're fearful or you feel like you feel like the shame. But once you can get beyond that, then you realize, well, I could be a teacher, I can be a mentor, I could be a coach. Like, is that
Yeah.
like you said, you just like it recently discovered that you were able to take all those steps on the rung and then kind of put it together, and then now you're kind of actualizing that.
yeah, that's so good. So what we realized is while we were isolating ourselves and just wanted to just be in our little caves, is that even though we weren't talking to people, we were listening to a lot of content online, we were listening to a lot of stories, and they weren't necessarily stories of people that had decided after IVF that they were going to stop IVF. So we chose not to actually listen to any IVF stories or any stories around childless by choice or nature. We just wanted to really listen to people's story about resilience, you know, because we needed to build up that resilience muscle.
Yeah, it's like you said, like those skills are transferable,
Yeah.
aren't they?
So what we actually realized was I can take what they did in that piece and actually apply it in my life here. And I can take what that person did in here. So we realized that stories really have the power to heal. And no matter what that story is, that story may have one little aspect or one little thing that can bring a breakthrough in someone else's life. Now, we're sure that our story isn't going to be for everyone. You know, some people can't relate to us. You know, some people can't relate to my Italianness. Some people can't relate to Sharlene. You know, that we're a mixed culture marriage with both born in Australia. We're first generations or second generations Australians. There's so many diversities within this little duo here. And we know we won't relate to anyone, you know, won't relate to everyone. But what we decided is that what if we could just get people's stories so people out there, you know, and that's why we started the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast of people who just sharing their story, just sharing the journey. You know, there are some of them are, you know, very, you know, I just wasn't happy and I chose to choose another path. Whereas some are quite, you know, this week I was interviewing someone and it was the first time in a podcast that I've done that I was in tears, you know, and it just hit me, this story. And yet Sharlene wasn't, she was moved, but not to the point of tears. But yet the strength and the resilience just appealed to me. And what I began to realize, and Sharlene, I'm not sure if this is for you, what you experienced the same, what I began to realize is my story, I'm actually really grateful.
Yeah, that's what happened.
The more I listened to stories, the more grateful I became for the life that I have. And the more empowered I became to change the areas that I did not like, but yet grateful for those areas because they would teach me something.
Yeah.
And I really began to say, because I was listening to people's stories, and while we're interviewing, I'm like, I don't know if I could go through what you went through. But they would say to me and Sharlene, we don't know if we could go through what you two went through.
Yeah.
So realizing that every story is unique to an individual and can bring so much healing to the world.
Absolutely. And look, for me, even though, like, I've maybe not always been grateful for the situation, but I've known that, like, throughout, the importance of being grateful in the situation. So there's so many things through a situation that we can be thankful for that can draw us gradually out of that and help us to move forward and heal. And looking at the support around me, just having like such a great support in Stephen, having some like of our family, even though they didn't always understand. I know it from my mom, she didn't understand a lot of things that we were going through, but she did her best to try and research and to talk to her friends and find out, okay, well, what is this about? And then we could come back and support us through that. And we didn't always agree on things, but I knew one thing's for sure, that she was always there to support us in the best way that she could. So looking at that support that we had around us, as hard as it was at times, is what has helped me get through these situations. And with those stories as well, that's also helped me to realize, yes, we can be thankful for everything that we've been through. I don't think I would change anything.
No, I wouldn't change
But it's
it.
like adversity tends to make you stronger. I mean, what I learned as an artist or just a creative person, like in software development, we fail all the time. Like we have ideas, and if we gave up, we would never get anywhere. Because if I give an example as a musician, right, I could have 100 demos, maybe only 2 of them are successful and actually getting any traction. So would you just give up? It's like part of what the process is like you have to go through the happy accidents and the mistakes or the things that didn't work, and you're grateful for that, because if I go through 98 songs and I get to the 99th or the 100th one that actually connects, I'm grateful for the experience that it took to get to that point. Same thing if I'm a software developer, all the code that didn't work led me to the code that did work. And so if you start to
Yeah.
think of things like that, a lot of people, they get into like, oh, I can't, I don't, failure is like not an option. It's like, well, failure is part of how you get to success. You can't have success without breaking some eggs. That's what happens. But people have this tendency to want to be so perfect. And to me in music, imperfection is actually beauty. A lot of times there's so many people trying to make things so clean that they get away from the actual, like the thing that people find beautiful in really great pieces of music is the fact that there's some imperfections in it. If you go back to the 70s and the 60s and you listen to some of the classics and you listen to them as a producer, there are all these microtonal errors and rhythmic errors in this mix. You tried to go through and make it perfect, it wouldn't be what it is. And I think it's the same thing in your life. Your life, you have to learn from the things that happen, the struggles that happen. Not everything's going to map out 100%. And that's just the nature of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love what you said. There's imperfection, there's beauty in imperfection, and that's so true.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautifully imperfect, right?
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned and alluded to the fact that even in nature, there's so many examples for us of how our life should be. It's like you look at, all these little rock formations that would seemingly be imperfect, but if it wasn't for those imperfections, it wouldn't be what it looks like today. Like those beautiful structures that we see.
Yeah. So
everybody's
what
trying to be
happened?
archetype. Yeah. Yeah. But
Yeah.
it's like, the forest, every tree is different. They might all, when you look at them, they might appear to be the same, but they're all different. They all have their individuality. And people think it's like, oh, it's like all that sameness. They want to go for the sameness. And that's actually not what it is. It's actually
Yeah.
your individuality combined together makes like the beauty of the whole forest.
Yeah, so true. And what we found is there's areas in your life that you can rewrite. If you can't write the whole thing, write a chapter, but each day is a new page, and all you have to do is pen your destiny. So it's looking at what areas do I identify that I need to do a rewrite in. Is it in my finances? Is it in my health? Part of the story was after the IVF, and when we decided no more, I think I had a predisposition to autoimmune disease, because I have I think it's a gene called HB27. So I was predisposed to autoimmune, but as soon as we made the decision, not realizing that decision was fueling a lot of adrenaline, like the adrenaline before was suppressing my immune system. But as soon as we made the decision not to go forward, my body just went into total chaos. And I had already always struggled with back pain and hip pain, but I just thought it was an old nursing injury because my background was nursing, not realizing that it was actually autoimmune related. And then I went blind in one eye because the inflammation came to my eye as well. And what I realized is that whole sickness, disease, and I still have the autoimmune disease. I still take medication, to keep it at bay and to reduce the inflammation and my spine from fusing. But it became so much of my narrative that it was taking over my life, and I started developing a victim syndrome. And so this was another area that I was like, no more. I have to rewrite this narrative. And so I started taking steps towards better health. When you're on immune suppressants and when you're on steroids, you tend to put on a lot more weight and things like that. And I used to be quite heavy, lost a lot of weight. And it was just like, okay, this is another area I need to rewrite now. And then we look at, with the economy and the price of going up, our finances is an area that we need to rewrite sometimes. And then we look at our family life is an area, our spiritual life is an area. So it's actually identifying what are the areas of your life that need a rewrite so you can write the whole book. And those areas are chapters in your rewrite. And you spoke about spirituality before and how important that is in the quietness. And it's actually getting quiet and asking yourself some really good questions. Asking yourself questions like, who do I want to be? Who do I want to help? What actually really excites me in life? One of our passions is, well, obviously what we do now, but one of our passions is also seeing people succeed financially, and helping, people in the gig economy. And so that's really important to us as well. And so because we know that finances plays such a big part, I don't believe money changes you, it just gives you options.
Makes you know what you're
Options and makes you more of who you are, So it's actually looking at rewriting your story is actually looking at limiting beliefs and internal conflicts that are stopping you from moving forward as well. And you can only identify those limiting beliefs and those internal conflicts once you get in that quiet place.
Yeah, well, you have to do the self-examination. Like I love a lot of poets. I read a lot of Victorian poetry from Blake and Tennyson, Wordsworth, Longfellow. And what I liked about it was the self-examination. And then it got me into singer-songwriters because I thought they continued that. Like a lot of the great singer-songwriters, you get like a Dylan, is continuing that kind of thinking, right? And so a lot of self-examination of relationships, and then microcosm relationships, macrocosm. And I got into sociology, was my major. And the idea that you can, you got to look at the microcosm, was like your individual relationships, and then the societal relationships, and understand there's like interconnections between how you deal as an individual with your own limiting beliefs, and then society has limiting beliefs. And so it's like, so if you align with those and you think it's the truth, you won't progress, right? Until you actually challenge it in yourself. And then you can look at the outside and say, well, look at what you really believe, what you really think you can do. And that self-examination does come from the quiet. It comes in a place where you finally have the courage to look in the looking glass and say, who is that? Looking back, like who am I? What do I want to be? And I looked at that for me, after the cancer, I decided I wasn't going to be scared of being public facing. That I wasn't going to be scared of talking, of being in the front, of traveling, going to Japan. There's things I would, pre-cancer, I wouldn't have done. Post-cancer, I said, well, if I can survive that, I can survive my own fear, and I can get beyond the things that I was scared of. And the thing is, things still scare you, but like at some points, like if I was scared of going to a place like Japan, and then I went. I was scared of going on the mic, I'm on the mic. So there's things that you can get beyond, that you just have to believe it. And once you trust yourself, then other people, it was like the law of attraction, stuff starts coming to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's so true.
And there's that saying that we don't know what we can do until we do it. It always seems impossible until it's done.
Yeah. Like, when you first started to do a podcast, like the first time, it's like I talk to a lot of people that want to do a podcast, and they talk about it, but then they never do it. Because there's the people who actually go and do it. Like maybe there was some trepidation about doing it because you wanted it to be perfect. You wanted to be well, you're not gonna, first episode not gonna be perfect. Like that's the first episode. You're gonna get out there. You're gonna learn. You're gonna get better. And like over time. But if you're trying to be 100% perfect on the first one, you probably won't ever do the first one.
Absolutely.
That's the problem with people. Like, how many people said they're going to do it and they don't do it because they're trying to be, like, you're not going to get it totally right the first time.
Absolutely.
Perfect in action.
Yeah. And going back to something else that you alluded to, what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. So we've got to be challenged to change, and that's so important, you know. And rising up and facing fear, you know. Fear can be crippling, but our faith needs to be stronger than our fear. And when I say that, is your goal, is your dream bigger than your pain? And it's only when our dream is bigger than our pain that we can make positive actions and positive steps towards that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me as well, like I feel that there may be a lot of people out there that feel like, yeah, well, I don't relate because I don't have anything wrong in my life, you know, like I'm just comfortable, I'm happy with where I am in life, but we don't know what happens as we go through our years, what's going to happen. We didn't expect that we would go through what we have. And, you know, we thought we were like perfectly fine until, you know, we went through it, and everybody's pretty much like that. I think what's really helped us is the fact that even before we went through these situations is that we've always had that passion and desire to improve on ourselves and look at tools and study and learn from other people and just equip ourselves with resources to manage things and to be able to be flexible.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. There's never been a time in our married life or as teenagers that we haven't been involved in either some personal development program, a mentoring group. There was a period of time when we decided to go in the cave that we didn't do it, but always throughout our lives, we've always done courses or been in masterminds. We're in a mastermind now with people that keep us accountable. And it's really important, you know, having that team behind you actually speeds up the healing process. And that's why I said at the beginning, healing happens in community. But the healing can only happen when the community suspends judgment. So they may have judgment, and Sharlene speaks about this a lot, you know, being a counselor. You can belong to a community and they can have judgment, that's okay. But when they're listening to you, and or if you are in a community and someone says something that you don't agree with, you don't have to agree with it. You've just got to put your judgment to the side for now. And when you put your judgment there and not allow it to affect your helping that person. And our advice to people also needs to be non-judgmental. Okay? Like we would have people say stupid and hurtful things to us.
Well-intentioned, but
well-intentioned.
Well thought out.
Yeah, like, what's wrong with you? You know, why don't you have kids? Is your faith not strong enough? Are you not praying enough? And things like that. And we're like, you don't know the pain that we're going through. Like this was in our mind. So now, you know, something you could say to someone that's going through someone is, hey, I don't understand what you're going through, and I may never understand what you're going through, but I just want you to know if you need someone to listen to you, I'm here. Yeah. And that's all it takes.
I can see you're struggling with something. You know, I may not understand what it is, but I do.
Well, I think it's like sense of community, because I think some people are so into camps. Like there's certain camps and ideologies and groups of people that have a certain concept, right? So they got this concept. They say, well, individualism is key. You know, that this means that you got to be self-reliant and you got to be this, and you got to be strong. And if they see any sense of what they perceive as weakness, they can't accept it, right? So they're not open-minded. So if you come to them and they perceive what you're saying as being weak, and they've got this kind of stoicism where like when they don't believe in that. So they just won't accept it. So you can like, well, okay, I understand who they are, and maybe I can still be around this person, but if they become so detrimental to me, maybe I can't. But you know, it's like you have to just understand like where people are, and you know, you try to strive to get people to be more empathetic, but some people are not. So if they're not, you know, and you know, in America we have a lot of people. They're in certain mindsets today. If they see me coming, they immediately think I'm in one camp or the other. They just automatically see me, and they didn't hear one word I said, and assume I'm in this camp. And I can talk all I want, and they're not going to listen to anything I said because they already prejudged. So that's a problem, you know. So it's like so you have to be. And I try to do this show because I talk to people all around the world, and I want to hear exactly what you have to say. And you know, I have a different point of view, but I don't go push it down and say, well, this is the only way. This is the only path. I think that's where people get stuck, because they get into some kind of thing where they feel this is the only path, this is the only way. It's like, well, that right there is their first mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. You know, like what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other. And that's why it's so important just to know yourself. You are the master. No one knows you better than you know yourself. But it's really important, again, alluding to get into that quiet place, get to know yourself at a deeper level. And it hurts.
It does.
Because you're going to have to face things or come to realize things that you are that you wish you weren't, and belief systems and other things. And, you know, it's painful, it tears you up, but there is freedom in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so, like, and we understand it can be quite uncomfortable and sometimes scary to examine ourselves because of those, like the very fact that we're maybe not happy with what we thought we were but are not. But it's okay, because you know our identity is not set in stone. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth. There's always room for change.
And if I can encourage the audience, never ask the question, why me? Or why am I going through this? Because it's such a dangerous place, and it can lead you into a spiral of despair, hopelessness, because we will never know the why. But what I've come to learn is the why is not important. And the day that I find out the why, that day it's not going to be important at all. Like I used to say, God, why? You know, why is this happening to us? Why are we going through this? And then I would and then I would realize, you know what? The day that I meet you face to face and I know the why, it's actually not going to matter anymore because I'm in your presence. And so I realized that why is so dangerous because it just leads you down a path. But maybe ask your question, what is the purpose for me going through this? And what's it going to serve me in? And I think that's a better question because you can discover truly the purpose of what you're going through.
And who can I become?
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Who can I become through this?
Well, I think the idea of the rewrite your life story is like I've talked to a lot of people, you know, therapists, and talking about like remapping your brain, right? So if you were doing something that was like very addictive, and you go through and you kind of rewrite your life story, you can change. You cannot get out of the addictive personality trait if you remap your brain, if you relearn how to be happy. You know, if you relearn, like, it's not drinking, it's not this, you change your behavior, which means you remap your brain that the reward is not the alcohol, the reward is not this. You change your mindset. Now, some people feel like, well, I can never change my mindset. Well, that's like first problem. Yeah, it's like you can remap, you can rewrite when you realize you're going to go through some pain, and some people don't want to go through that pain. It's like that they're fearing the pain, but like you fear the pain more than you fear going through what you're going through. Is like your codependency with yourself. You know, with your current behavior is not really moving you forward. So if your current behavior is comfortable, but it leaves you in this really bad place, and you're comfortable with that, like it's going to hurt to get out of there. It's not going to be magic to get out of there. And that's like what we try to talk about as a musician, and we try to describe these kind of things and see people get these universal ideas. A lot of it's pain. If you hear the most songwriters, it's all about pain and how they kind of worked it out to put it in this piece of art. And they're hoping that it's kind of universal and people can understand it. And sometimes they work through it and got to a better place. It's kind of like that in life. You kind of work through that and admit it, to put it out in the world, and then, you know, move on.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the one thing I noticed is that through the whole pain journey, I think if it wasn't for that, we probably wouldn't be where we are today. And I think sometimes the harder the pain, and it's not easy going through it, but it seems that the victory, the overcoming at the end of it, and the healing is much more sweeter with the pain than without.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's kind of interesting that you have to go through these kind of crucible moments in life to get to the next moment. You know, that it's like people's all like, this the guy who's like Henry Ford, he must have had an easy time. Or Steve Jobs, you know, had an easy time, and at least, you know, Elon Musk, they all went through the thing. They're still going through it. You know, each of the people who are still around. Like, it's never as easy as you think. It's never, you know, just because somebody got somewhere, you don't know everything they had to go through, and all the things they had to get to. And every human being goes through this stuff. So there's empathy. That's where you start to get the empathy. Like when you talk to people, as many people I've talked to, you start to understand the human condition. You start to understand that people want to be heard, people want to be listened to, they want to have their point of view get across. They want it, and then eventually, you know, what you see is the common thread. People want to help other people by storytelling, which is a very old thing. You know, before we ever wrote anything down, we told oral histories. And that's what we do as human beings. We communicate.
Yeah.
So I think that's very vital. And you know, people should never think words don't matter. Words are very powerful.
The most powerful things we have is our words, and standing in our words and allowing others the space to tell their stories as well. You know, it's no good us telling our stories when we're not willing to listen to other people's stories. Our greatest healing has come by listening to other people's stories. You know, our healing has not. Our healing has not.
Yeah,
it hasn't necessarily come by telling
your podcast. Yeah, I mean, you were talking. I saw that your podcast gained popularity for insightful content because you're not just telling your story, you're telling other people's story. I think some people make the mistake when they get into things where it's all about like them, and what you find out was that when you start to include other people, and you start to hear, like you said, when you listen to somebody else's story, that becomes super, you know, I think relatable. Then when people see I think you have authenticity. Probably you've got a lot of fans. It's because your authenticity of listening to other people and giving them a platform, along with your insightful stories of your own experience, is the full package, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We told our story on the first episode, and we haven't told it since. And the reason why we told it on the first episode is so people knew actually what we were doing and why we were doing the podcast. And it's true because, you know, when Sharlene and I, when we sat in silence and we really felt impressed to do the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast, we knew it wasn't about us. We knew it was about creating a movement or a community where people could share their stories, not necessarily meet other people, but meet people through the spoken word, like you say, but have an impact on others that they don't even know. You know, I have, you know, we get, like just this week I received a message, and a lady messaged me who's one of our biggest fans, I think. And she said to me, you know, this week we released a episode around porn addiction and masculinity with one of the speaker who set up a thing. And this lady, she goes, I listened to it. I did not think I would get anything out of it because, you know, has nothing to do with, you know, I'm not struggling in that area. She goes, it was one of the best episodes and I learned so much on how I can support other people. So it's that ripple effect, you know. So yeah. I was like, oh,
it doesn't always have to be something that you're experienced with or interested in or think that you even want to listen to that actually draws you in. And that's like where I think is like we're always learning, and you know, oral history or oral tradition of talking, listening to people, that I think is like how we learn, how human beings learn is like, why do you go to that lecture? Why do you go to that symposium? Why are you going to this convention? Why are you taking a master class? Because you need to communicate. Like you said, you have to talk to other people. You have to get around other people. Community is what heals you. That's how it connects you. That's how we operate. And so I want to, again, thank you for being on the show, because we actually are hitting at the hour point. But remind people that www.rewriteyourlifestory.com is your website, and it's fully clickable when we're published, which will be on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch as soon as we're off of here. And then later, we'll be on all the major podcasts that are available, from Spotify to Apple to Amazon, all Google, all the major places. We'll have a landing page for your audience to be able to check that out tomorrow. And I want to thank you for being on the Fam Electricos podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very honored.
Thank you. Have a good morning. Because I think it's nighttime here.
Thank you so much.
Thank
That was
you.
awesome. I hope it went well for you.